Today I'm going to show you how to make an extra $20,000 to $60,000 on the purchase and eventual resale of your house. Hi everyone, I'm Cody Koch. Welcome to the channel where I talk about trading, investing, and business concepts. Okay, so first let's start off by using this chart. This is the National Association of Realtors Single Family Home Pricing Index. Now this index goes back to the 1960s, 1968 to be exact. Let's zoom out a little bit, just show you that. And you can see that this thing has a very unique trait to it. It's 1968. You see these waves, these interesting waves. I've looked at a lot of charts in my day, and I've never seen waves this consistent. When I see waves like this, I usually get skeptical, and I have a suspicion that there's something wrong with the data, or the data has somehow been weirdly smoothed out, or seasonal adjustments, or something like that. Well, when I dug into this, I didn't see that. What I found is actually a very powerful what's known as seasonal tendency. Now, seasonal tendency, there's 10 major philosophies of trading and investing, and seasonal tendencies is one of those philosophies you can make money with. You will see here in housing prices, at least single family homes, you can see a very strong seasonal tendency that you can potentially profit from. Now, the recent housing prices, this was let me move myself out of the way. This was as of August of 2022. And you can see in June of 2022, prices hit an all-time high. Not a coincidence. You'll see in January of 2022, they hit the lowest they've been in the most recent period. In June of 2021, it hit its all-time high previous to that. And in January of 2021, it hit another short-term, what's called swing low. So let's go back here. Now, you can see this massive increase all of a sudden after COVID occurred. And the reason that happened is because the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates massively, and the government, through the banking system, started creating an enormous amount of dollars. And that, of course, inflated all kinds of things. That's why we're dealing with inflation today, is all this money creation. But that also created a bubble in real estate. You can see this dramatic spike up. Now, that's not what we're going to talk about today, though. I'm just pointing that out on the chart. What I want to talk about is this nice, consistent up and down trend going back many, many decades. In the late spring, early summer months, prices of single-family homes have a tendency to hit their high for the year. Meanwhile, in winter, particularly around January, you will see prices hit their low of the year. So you see here the swing low was in January of 2020, a swing high was in June of 2019, swing low was January of 2019, swing high was June of 2018, etc. And you can see this very particular trend here. Now what this means is that this very likely is a very nice profit opportunity. And so let me show you approximately what's possible with this. So let's run some numbers. The average household in the United States who owns a home will own a home for approximately 5 years, according to the banking system in the United States. So let's go back to prior to COVID, before the COVID spike really got crazy. And let's see what would have been possible if you would have been able to take advantage of these seasonal tendencies. So let's say you didn't know these seasonal tendencies and you did what most people do. Most people buy their houses in spring and summer. Very few buy their houses in winter. On the other hand, most people who go to sell their houses prefer to sell their houses in May and June, primarily because it's a lot more comfortable to move during that time of year than it is in the dead of winter. So what you're going to see here, let's say that we decided to buy a house in June of 2014. So let's go find June of 2014. So that would have been right here. A house price of that time would have been $222,000. If let's say we would have bought a house at that date, went in and purchased a house. And let's say 5.5 years later, let's say we sold the house 5.5 years later in January of 2020, right before COVID. So that would have been right here. So it would have been January of 2020. So we got some appreciation. The house definitely went up due to inflation and all these other things going on. And we would have sold that house for $266,300. You can actually see it right up here in this little corner up there. $266,300. So if we'd have purchased the house for $222,000 in June of 2014 and sold it for $266,300 in January of 2020, we would have made about $44,300 in profit, which would have worked out to be approximately a 20% return on our original investment. Not too shabby for 5.5 years in a piece of real estate. Now, what would happen, however, if we would have bought this property in a little bit better timing? What would happen if we would have moved this purchase just 6 months earlier? Just move the whole deal 6 months earlier. Well, in that case, we would have purchased a house in January of 2014 for, as you can see here, $187,900. 5.5 years later, it would have been June of 2019, right here, we would have been able to sell that house for $285,400. Now again, these are just estimates, but let's just go with it a little bit. Now that difference, obviously massive appreciation in this case. We would have made, in this case, a profit of $97,500. So we held the house for the exact same amount of time, but we made $97,500, which would have been a return of 51.9% on our original purchase price. So let's go through this two scenario real quick. June of 2014, we could have bought a house for $222,000 and sold it in January of 2020 for $266,300. We would have made $44,300, which would have a return on investment of just 20%. Versus just moving that purchase just 6 months earlier and sale 6 months earlier. We could have purchased it in January of 2014 for $187,900, sold it for June of 2019 for $285,400. We would have made $97,500 in profit, or 51.9% return on our money. That is a significantly higher profit. And to put that in perspective, that's approximately a $53,000 extra profit just by buying in the dead of winter and selling at the heat of summer. Okay, so why does this work? The reason this works is because winter is a very uncomfortable time to go house shopping, especially in November and December. Why? Because everybody's distracted by holidays, traveling, the end of school, the end of college, all kinds of things are going on. A lot of businesses are focusing on end of year processes and end of year sales. There's a lot of things going on. Everyone's distracted, it's snowy, it's cold, it's no fun to go house shopping during this time. On the other hand, people wanting to sell their houses in the dead of winter are usually people that are forced to. Maybe they have to move for a job. Maybe there's been a death in the family. Maybe there has been a divorce. No telling what's going on. For some reason, they're having to sell and at a very uncomfortable time of the year. So if you go out to buy, you're much more likely to find a deal. Prices have a tendency to go down in the winter, as you can see with these charts, and that's a great opportunity for you to acquire an asset that, whether you live in it or you invest in it, maybe you rent it out, it is a good opportunity to be able to acquire an asset. On the other hand, when you go to sell, the late spring and early summer months are usually the best time to sell. So why would May and June be the best times to sell? Well, generally speaking, that's because school is over, families are moving around, people are changing jobs, there's a bright, warm summer coming along. It's much more comfortable to move your houses. Maybe it's families upgrading from a smaller house to a larger house, or maybe somebody's downgrading, and it's much more comfortable moving during the spring and summer months. So people come out looking for shopping around for homes. On the other hand, a lot of sellers are interested in selling their houses, of course, but generally speaking, there's a lot more demand in those months than there is supply in those months. And so for that reason, this is a great time to sell your house. Okay, so here's how you kind of do this. When you want to be shopping for a house to purchase, you want to be looking in the most uncomfortable time, like I said. You want to look at some point in November and December. You probably want to make an offer and get a house under contract at some point in December or early January. The reason you want to do that is about 30 days later is when the house will actually close, give or take a little bit. And when that house closes, that's when that data is followed by the National Association of Realtors. So that means houses that were sold in January were generally put under contract at some point in late November or December. And so to kind of keep that in mind, that means at the time all the negotiations going on to set the final price, there's a lot of things happening. You've got holidays, you've got people traveling, you've got the end of year for all kinds of things from school to work related stuff. It's cold, it's uncomfortable, nobody's wanting to shop, so it's a great time to get a house under contract. So when you go to sell your house, and unfortunately it's generally easier to time the buying of your house than it is to time the selling of your house, because selling of your house, it's going to have to usually be the right person come along who wants to purchase your house. But that said, depending on your area, it may take you anywhere from 30 days to 90 days or longer to sell a house. If that's the case, you're probably going to want to put it on the market a month or 2 months before May. And the reason you want it in May is because May is when you're probably going to get it under contract, and that's when that under contract, or that's when you're aiming for it to get under contract. You get it under contract in May, and it will generally close some point in June or July, which is where, historically speaking, prices are their highest. So that's usually what you want to do to how to manage this kind of situation. So the more uncomfortable it is, that's the best time to buy, and the more comfortable it is, that's the best time to sell these houses. Okay, so I also want to point out something historically just for full information on this. Let's say you would have used this technique all the way back in 2007, 2008 when the market was about to fall apart. You didn't have to know that the market was about to fall apart. Let's just say you'd have done something like so. In 2006, it hit an all-time high. You can see up here, $230,000 in July of 2006. If you'd have waited just 6 months later, however, into January of 2007, you could have purchased a house for $211,000. That's about a $19,000 difference, which is about a 9%, give or take, difference in the purchase price price of this house. Now, what's interesting about that may not seem like a lot when you're looking at this chart, but the difference is it would have taken you approximately, from the purchase in June or July of 2006, it would have taken you approximately 9 years until June of 2015 to break even on this deal. On the other hand, if you'd have waited just 6 months, in January of 2007, you would have reached a new high again. Your house would have been above water, so to speak, in June of 2013. That's a difference of approximately 6.5 years. So you're talking 9 years to break even if you'd have bought in June versus 6.5 years if you'd have bought in January. Just to kind of give you an example of what this can do. So this technique can not only make you money, it can also save you money naturally. As one would say, is a penny saved is a penny earned, and that's very true, especially in this case. So somebody actually pointed out when I was doing some research on this, why not buy in like January and 6 months later sell in June, and then buy again 6 months later in January and sell in June? In theory, that makes sense on this chart, but in reality is the transaction costs are pretty heavy in real estate. And so you will have to wait longer than 6 months to a year, 2 years, 3 years in order to make sure there's enough equity in it built up just simply through the normal inflation of real estate, as you can see here, as it just has a tendency to go up. So it's not necessarily something you can trade and make money with. So I just wanted to point that out. I have found that because those transaction costs are high enough, it will not be something you could regularly do. But if you are going to own a home for a number of years, whether you're leasing it out, renting it out, or you're purchasing it and you consuming it for your own usage, or you're purchasing it for your own home or for your own living, then and only then does this technique really help your overall returns. I do want to point this out too. Historically speaking, going back far enough, I did find that on average, you can expect a house price using this technique of buying in January and selling in June. You can actually gain anywhere from a minimum of 5% extra to as much as 15%, or in some cases 20% extra than what you would have otherwise. As the example I showed earlier, made an extra $53,000 by doing that, which was an extra significant return of almost 30% on its money over a 5.5 year period. That is what you will generally find in this kind of technique. You should expect an extra 5 to 15% return on the purchase and subsequent sale of your house using this technique. And in many cases, it can go up and be much higher. Just consider this a guide. These are just average home, single-family home prices across the United States. In your area, prices will most assuredly be higher or lower than this, depending on the size of the home. If you're wanting to buy a larger home or smaller home, these prices are going to be different. But however you look at it, if you're buying in the winter months, particularly around December and January, and selling in the spring, summer months, particularly around May and June, is when you're going to have the highest possible return on your home value, just by timing your purchases based upon these seasonal tendencies. So hopefully this information was very helpful to everybody. If you find this interesting, please like and subscribe. Let me know. If you have any questions, please leave a question in the comment section. I appreciate it, and have a great day.